What have you picked up over the last week or so?
Yeah, so first, Mark, I think, one of the things in fall camp, I think that you, as a fan or as a supporter, that you think of, and you when you see news, it's not always good news in fall camp. So there's obviously injuries or, suspensions or things like that that happen. So unfortunately, Oklahoma has gotten bit a little bit by the injury bug. So Jaden Gibson, wide receiver, a little bit over 300 yards a year ago, had a pretty good season last year and really came on in the spring, and then had a really good summer for Oklahoma. I think they're a little hush hush on this, but he's going to be out for quite some time. Had an issue. I'm not sure if it was an ACL, MCL, whatever that is, but seems like he will be out by all accounts. He'll miss some significant time um, for. Uh, for Oklahoma this fall, which is a bummer. Like I said, I think he's a kid that had an opportunity to be one of their 3 or 4 best wide receivers. However, I think the silver lining on that for Oklahoma is the fact that Oklahoma has some depth there, and so that could be a position that they could afford to find, a little bit of hit. So that's really the only significant injury. There's been a couple. Taylor Tatum, true freshman running back. He's a kid that I think he's banged up a little bit and probably more of like a week or two type of situation. And then Nick Anderson had a little bit of a hammy strain. So I think those two aren't as obviously as significant as the Jaden Gibson injury, but this is the time early on in camp where where things tend to happen a little bit, just from an injury perspective. So just wanted to make sure we started there before we kind of get into, a little bit of the intel. And so I'll start kind of first. So just some of the standouts that I've heard, and I want to preface this by saying, a lot of the standouts that I've seen are more on the offensive side, and it's more. I think it's not indicative of necessarily how camp has gone so far. From everything that I've heard, the defense is, I don't know if I would say significant, but ahead of the offense, which is what you typically expect early on in camp, right? With the defense being ahead of it. But I think it's more so, and we can get to that, Mark, but I think more so the guys on defense who are expected to be contributors are the ones that are standing out. And here, there's some on the offensive side of the ball. There's some younger kids um, that are um, that are playing well and maybe putting themselves into a role that we may not have identified early on. So first, from an offensive lineman, Michael Tarkin, is a transfer in from USC. He's a guy that has really played well. I think so much so that he's a guy that they have been running with the ones, from an offensive line perspective, for a majority of this first week or so, week and a half, of camp. And so I think most people kind of looking at this offensive line coming into the season thought perhaps that, Jacob Sexton would be a guy that would be one of your but would be your left tackle. But it looks like right now, so much so that they're sliding Jacob Sexton inside a little bit. So that's something to keep an eye on, from an offensive line perspective. Again, he's one of the transfers. I think Sexton probably is better. I mean, this is a very good thing, I think, from an offensive line perspective, looking at it for OU. But I think, uh, because I think Sexton works a little bit better inside than he does at tackle. Maybe doesn't have quite the movement and foot speed, lateral quickness that you would like from a left tackle. And the fact that, Tarkin is really kind of showing himself early on, I think is a good thing for that offensive line, kind of ahead of time. Just kind of going backwards from there, quarterback position. Excuse me. Quarterback position for Oklahoma, obviously all eyes and kind of the thoughts are on Jackson Arnold, and think there's, from what I've heard and seen, I think there is a, progression that the coaches and the team is, really really excited about, in terms of, he's not turning the ball over much, if at all. I mean, I think the he's taking care of the ball. He's making some big plays with his feet, making some big plays with his arm downfield. I think the one caveat, and I think this is something that you'll see happen with time as he develops some of that rapport with the receivers, is that there's a little bit of inconsistency from an accuracy standpoint at times, and so you would anticipate that getting better as obviously fall practice goes on, and then certainly game time goes on as well. So I know will always be interested in there, but I think maybe. We've talked about Michael Hawkins a bit on here, and he's a guy that came in. I think most people thought Casey Thompson would grab that uh, backup quarterback position, and we talked a little bit about in the spring. According to some, he was one of the most impressive freshmen that was on campus, and did some good things in the spring game and just some of the spring practices what he did, and so I'm told he's really carrying that over to fall camp here, having a really good fall camp. His athleticism and his ability to kind of break out of the pocket and make things happen with his feet, just improvise, kind of a la. I mean, and I'm not obviously not comparing him to him at this point, but just kind of makes you, especially his stature, makes you think of a Kyler Murray in terms of how he's able to, to kind of get out of the pocket and make decisions out of the pocket, whether with his feet or with his arm downfield, and so I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him grab that backup role based on what I'm seeing. I think that'll be interesting to continue to watch, Mark, as we get through fall camp here. But if maybe he's the number two, but if something was to go awry with Jackson Arnold, maybe they're not. Maybe they would go with Casey Thompson just from a experience perspective, but maybe Michael Hawkins would be the number two in name. But so I think that's something to really something to look at. And Javante Barnes, from the running back perspective, is a guy that has shown a lot early on, a lot more consistent. It seems to be a little bit more fluid. Was having problems. I think last year just had some injury problems. I had, and admittedly through an interview early on, had some confidence problems, right? And really just not getting on the field, not getting out of the doghouse, and just was really down on himself, and so he's been a guy that's really been running right there, toe to toe, so to speak, with Gavin Sawchuk in terms of that 1-2 punch. So I think good for Oklahoma fans to see him, because I think there was some, Oklahoma has a lot of talent at the running back position coming in, but I know it's not. They need a couple of guys to step up. They need SEC guys to show up, because you're not going to be able to rely on one running back. And Gavin Sawchuk has had some injuries in the past, so I think that's certainly good to see there. And just kind of rounding out the offense, then we can certainly go to the defense. I think kind of playing off of that injury for Jaden Gibson, there's been a couple of guys that are looking to step up, and certainly are stepping up. JJ Hester, which has been a little bit of a forgotten name for Oklahoma, transferred a couple years ago in from Missouri, really just hasn't been able to get on the field. Sounds like he's putting a lot of this together. He's an experienced guy, been in the system. Well, I know it's a new system, but been at Oklahoma for a few years now. I believe this is his third year, if I remember right, here at Oklahoma. I think he's a senior. He might be a senior this year. I'd have to go look and just double check that. But he's a guy that's really played well. Ivan Carrion, true freshman, and I think he's really impressed with his athleticism and his size as well. So those are two guys that are I think right now, everything that I'm hearing have really just made that leap, and maybe hopefully will soften the blow of Jaden Gibson leaving, that they'll need to have that depth, particularly early on.